So in our last session, or the session before that, we dealt with the length of a line, the midpoint of a line segment, and the slope. And today we're going to do few things related to that, but the questions will be indirect. So if we look at this question, if M is 3 and 2 is the midpoint of AB, find the coordinate of B if the coordinate of A is -1 and 4. To answer this question, you have to understand what it's saying. But let me go back to the session before that we were able to find the midpoint where we're given the endpoints of a line segment. So if a line segment had the point 5 and 4, 5 and 4, and -3 and -2, and let's call these points A and B. If I want to find the midpoint in here, what I do, I find the midpoint MP for midpoint by adding the two x's. So I'll add the -3 plus 5, so adding x1, x2, and divide them by 2. Remember I said you could name this x1, y1 if you want, or x2, y2, it doesn't matter. But if you name this x1, y1, then you must name this x2, y2. So you add x1 plus x2 as indicated in the formula here, divide them by 2, and add y1 plus y2, so -2 plus 4. And sorry about the brackets here, we don't need the brackets there. And divide them by 2. Now, because it's a coordinate, I'm going to put brackets all around it. Now, -3 plus 5 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And -2 plus 4 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So, wow, the midpoint ended up being 1 and 1. So the midpoint is right here at 1 and 1. So that's your midpoint, which is 1 and 1. Okay. Now, the thing is, in this line here, of course, this is a line, AB, AB. We were able to find the midpoint, and the midpoint was 1 and 1. So with this question here, you're given A, and you're given M being the midpoint, and they want you to find this point instead. Okay, so that's how the question is asked. They said if A is given, and the midpoint is 3 and 2, find the coordinate of point B. So there's a way of doing this. Okay. And the best way to do it, and I'm going to do this without even, maybe I'll draw this. So let's go to that question. As I said, in this question, you're given M and you're given A, and they want you to find B. So how do we do that? Let's explore this question and do it on this number line here and show you how to do that. So I'm given M being 3 and 2. So M being 3 and 2. So that's 3 and 2 right there. And M indicates it's the midpoint, and it's 3 and 2. And I'm given point A is -1 and 4. So -1 and 4. So this is my A point. And I'm asked to find point B. So if this is the midpoint, definitely B is going to be somewhere in here, so that, you know, this will be right. This will be right in the middle between A and B. M will be right in the middle. So how do we find the point exactly? Okay. I mean, there's a way to find it by counting how much it's going down and how much is going to the right if you want to do it by graphing. So you go 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So what you do, you go 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have your point right here. So it's going to be 7 and 0. That's what A is going to be. Or sorry, B. That's what B is going to be. Okay. Now, how do we do that? Algebraically, though. Yeah. So how you do it algebraically is, now if point B is x2, y2, let's call it x2, y2. Yeah. And this will be x1, y1. Now I know to find the x coordinate of the midpoint, I have to go x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And that should give me the x coordinate of the midpoint, which should equal 3. Now also I'm given what x1 is, which is -1. So therefore -1 plus x2 divided by 2 equals 3. Now multiply that 2 into there. So we get -1, that's cross multiplying, plus x equals 6. And add 1 to both sides. And x equals 7. So the x value of B is correct. Now, how about the y value of the midpoint? So we know to find the midpoint or the y value of the midpoint, I always add y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And then when I do that, I should get the y coordinate, which is right here, the 2, right there, because that's the y coordinate of the midpoint. Okay, so that comes from this formula still. We know x1 plus x2 will give me 3, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2 will give me 2 if I had the 2 points. But here I'm asked indirectly, I'm given A and the midpoint, and they want me to find this. Of course, we don't know this. I just did it by graphing, by using the graph, but also I want to show you how to find it algebraically. So therefore I go y1, which is the right here, which is 4, plus y2, which I'm trying to find out, which is the y coordinate of B, or y value of the B coordinate, divided by 2 should give me 2. Now cross multiplying 2 into 2, that will give me 4 plus y2 gives me 4. Solve for y2 by minusing 4 from both sides. y2 equals 0. So that's how we find the x and the y coordinate of B when we're given A and we're given the midpoint. So therefore, B equals 7 and 0. And that's your answer right there. Okay. Now I wrote you another one. If A is -2 and -3, so just replacing that right here, find the coordinate of B given the midpoint 3 and 2. So you could try this one on your own, okay? And we'll go to the next question. So here's another question. This question involves slope. So find the value of A of the line segment joining the given points -2 and -1, and that's P, and point Q is A and 2, and has the given slope 3/4. So again, this is indirect question. Usually they give us the 2 points P and Q, and they ask us to find the slope. But here they're giving us the point P, but the Q, they only give me the y coordinate, but they don't give me the x coordinate, but they're giving me the slope, and they want me to find A. Again, in this one, basically go back to basics, which is the formula of the slope. And I said the slope could be represented by M. So M, which means the slope, equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now we're given the slope, which is 3/4. So I'm just gonna sub 3/4 for the slope. And I'm gonna call this x1, y1, and I'm gonna call this x2, y2. So it's y2 minus y1, so y2 is 2, minus y1, which is -1, so minus and negative is gonna be +1, all over x2, which is a, minus x1, which is -2, and that's gonna make it +2 here. And now we could solve for a by cross multiplying. Okay, but let's simplify first before we cross multiply. So 3/4 equals 3 over a plus 2. And what I'm going to do at this stage, I'm going to cross multiply the 4 into the 3, and I'm going to cross multiply the a plus 2 into the 3. So how this is going to look like, it's going to look like 3 brackets a plus 2, and they have my equal sign, and then 4 times 3 is 12. Now 3a plus 6 equals 12. Take away 6 from both sides, and that's going to give me 3a equals 6. Remember, taking away 6 from both sides. And now 3a equals 6, and therefore a equals 2 because I'm dividing both sides by 3. And therefore the x value of point Q is 2. So a is 2. Okay, so basically, if we go back and substitute 2 for a, so let's write p, which is -2 and -1, and q being a. Oops, we found what a is, so I'm just gonna write 2 and 2. Now, if I find the slope between these 2 points to see if I'm gonna get 3/4, so I could confirm what I've done is right, then I'm gonna just use the slope formula. So therefore it's y2, so I'm gonna name this x2, y2, and I'm gonna name this x1, y1. So it'll be 2 minus y1, which is -1, so that's gonna be +1, and then here x2, which is 2 minus -2, so that's gonna come +2, and that gives me 3 over 4. So confirmed. This is just to check if what you've done is right. You plug in the a value, which is 2, and find the slope between these 2 points, and see if you're gonna get 3/4, so we know what we've done here is correct. Okay. So find the slope of a line segment parallel and another perpendicular to a segment with a given slope, -7 and 4. So what this is asking, it's asking if you have a line that has a slope of a -7 and 4, then a line that's parallel to this line, what's the slope of that line? And if a line is perpendicular to that line with the slope of -7 over 4, the line perpendicular to that one, what would the slope be? Okay, so 2 things we must know here. We must know that parallel lines have equal slopes. So this one is easy. But perpendicular lines, and this indicates perpendicular lines, have negative reciprocal slopes. So therefore, the line that's parallel, the parallel line, the slope m indicates the slope will be -7 over 4, because it would be the same as this slope, since this line here is parallel to the line given in here. Okay, but how about if it's perpendicular? So the perpendicular line will have negative, so negative, so it, negative of a negative, so it'd be negative of this, so that becomes positive. And the reciprocal means you flip the fraction. So as we said, the perpendicular line will have the negative reciprocal slope. So reciprocal means you flip the fraction, and negative means if the sign of the original slope was positive, it would become negative with the perpendicular line. But if the slope of the original line is negative, then when you put the negative in front of it, it becomes positive, and then you're flipping the 7 over 4, so it'll be +4 over 7, and usually we don't write the plus in front, because if we don't write it, it indicates it's a plus. fraction. So that's basically the answer to these two questions. This is easy. Now we're just gonna do the last question, which will be just a little bit harder than this one right here. So here's two tougher questions. Find the value of k if each of the following are slopes of parallel lines. So basically, they're saying you have two lines and you're given both of their slopes. Now you want to find k, so to make these two lines parallel. So basically, you're trying to make sure that you find the value of k. When you divide k by 5, you should get negative 0.6. And then that guarantees these two lines are parallel, because you have to get negative 0.6 here. So both slopes are the same, and then both parallel. So what can we do with this? There are a few things that we could do. I'll show you two things. You could just write k over 5 should equal negative 0.6, because this slope must equal this slope for the two lines to be parallel. And then if you cross multiply the 5 there, then k would be 5 times negative 0.6, and that would give you negative 3. Okay. And of course, if you take the negative 3 and put it in for the k to test, negative 3 over 5, of course, that's going to give you negative 0.6. You just multiply that by bottom by 2 to make it 10. And then do the same thing to the top, and that gives you negative 6. And negative 6 over 10 gives you negative 0.6. You just want to double check. Okay. So that's the fastest and easiest way maybe to do it. And cross multiplying is just an amazing tool. A lot of students don't use it, but it's an amazing tool that always gets you out of trouble. Or the other thing is to change the negative 0.6 to fractions. So that gives you negative 6 over 10. And if you want to get even better, you change it to negative 3 over 5, because you reduce the fraction. So that gives you negative 3 over 5, doesn't it? Now, k over 5 should equal negative 3 over 5, which is the negative 0.6 in fractions. And therefore, if you could just, when you have this, k over 5 and negative 3 over 5, that is something that you could learn, and that would be new for you. Because the bottom here is the same as the bottom of the other side of the equal sign, you could just cancel the 5s. And therefore, k equals negative 3. Here, maybe you learned something new for some of you. Some of you maybe you know this already, but you just know that you could do that. Okay. And therefore, k equals negative 3. So as we found it here, we found it here. Okay. So how about this? Find the value of k if each of the following are slopes of perpendicular lines. Now, if these two lines are perpendicular, then this slope and this slope, they should be the negative reciprocal of one another. So we know one slope, which is negative, that's m1, which is negative 1 over half. And therefore, this here should equal 2 over 1, isn't it? Because if two lines are perpendicular, then they should have the negative reciprocal slope of one another. So if this is negative 1/2, then this should equal 2 over 1, or 2. So now you could just take the 4 over k and make it equal 2 over 1. And then just cross multiply. So there, and you end up with 4 times 1, which is 4 equals 2k. And now divide both sides by 2. Therefore, k equals 2. And therefore, if you want to test that, 4 over k, so 4 over 2, which is k is 2, gives you 2 over 1, or 2. So that's exactly what would make this thing is the negative reciprocal of that. So if you make k 2, then 4 divided by 2 will end up giving you 2. So the slope here would be 2, which is exactly the negative reciprocal of that. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it at this. And maybe on the next session, I will do one question that's related to this stuff, and then I'll move on to the next chapter, which is straight lines. We'll talk about how we graph them, how we find the equation of a straight line in different forms, and so on. So that will be done next week. But for now, we'll just keep it at here for the coordinate geometry of line segments. As I said, I will do one more question maybe at the beginning of next session for this chapter, and then we'll move on. Till next time, bye-bye.